What's up, everybody? Thralls Metal here once again. I'm the Crockneck, and I am back once again with yet another States of Metal. Been trying to get a lot of the states that have smaller metal scenes kind of out of the way, because, again, like the bigger ones are probably going to take multiple videos. And once again, we have another state that may not be well known for metal, maybe minus one band, but still has some really killer bands, and that state is Iowa. So what do I know about Iowa? Well, it's the 29th state of the Union. It is the Hawkeye state, as its nickname. It is also the food capital of the U.S., as it produces more corn, soybeans, and various other products than any other state in the United States. Jesus, this sounds like Ohio. I mean, to be honest, if I went on a road trip with someone that had never been to the Midwest in the United States, we could probably drive all the way from Ohio to Iowa, and I'm sure their take would be, wow, Ohio's really big. There's really no difference. It's just cornfields, soybean fields, wheat fields, and then the occasional large city. But yeah, tying into that whole food capital of the U.S. thing, there are more pigs in Iowa than there are people. And that's not dogging Tinder out there, might be dogging Farmers Only out there. But yeah, I believe the ratio of pigs to people is like 7-to-1 out there. It also has more golf courses per capita than any other state, which I was really shocked by, because I figured if anything, that would be like Florida or California. Iowa also has the highest literacy rate of any state in the United States. Now, I don't know if they've updated that recently, but I did find that kind of shocking. But then again, I'm from Ohio, and I didn't really want to look to see where we ranked on that one, because I'm from Ohio. The Red Delicious apple was made there, or hybridized there, or whatever. Maybe just named there. Either way, when I think of Red Delicious apples, I think that had to be the first apple that anyone ever tried, because literally every other apple tastes better than a Red Delicious. In fact, the whole name is a lie, outside of it being red. Yeah, sure, they taste like an apple, but they also taste like they have pencil eraser dust in them too. The first digital computer was actually built in Iowa, and I actually looked up a picture of it, and literally it looked like a giant fucking synth that any prog band would drool over. I wasn't sure if I was looking at a computer or, just equipment that Emerson, Lake and Palmer used, or Alan Parsons' project. And another, I don't want to say shocker, but I mean, it did seem interesting that this state is among the 10 safest states to live, which wasn't a huge shocker. The Midwest is boring. Yeah, okay, Detroit and Chicago definitely have their action. And I'm not gonna lie, Toledo too. But the real shock was seeing that it was ranked behind New Jersey. New Jersey is not a place that I think of for safety. I think about a great state to dump radioactive waste in. And I'm sure most people from New Jersey would also probably agree, yeah, no, that's kind of what we did here, or still do. And of course, because it's a state in the United States, we have some really strange laws. And one of the first ones that I saw that I was just dude, that one just seems kind of petty, was the law that it was illegal for a mustache man to kiss a woman in public. Instantly, I thought whoever wrote this law was probably some dude that just couldn't grow a mustache, and he lost his woman to some dude that probably looked like Sam Elliott, who just strolled into town with his womb broom and just swept his girl off her feet. And he was like, well, fuck that guy. At least I won't have to see them doing this in public. Another interesting one, and another one that seems just outright spiteful, and I have no idea why. It says that one-armed piano players must play for free. Dude, this dude's already hard on his luck and probably really struggling to book gigs, but nah, fuck him. He can't make money on, just playing piano at a bar or something. Moving from weird and spiteful to just weird, it is illegal for a horse to eat a fire hydrant. That was actually written down. I don't know why that law needed to be made. I don't know if there was an instant where that was even fucking possible. Another one that I thought was interesting was in Mount Vernon, you need written permission to throw bricks or rocks, and they even specified rubber gun. Oddly enough, it didn't say shoot, it still said throw, but that just may have been, how it was printed out. But yeah, you need written permission to do any of those, or throw any of those, or shoot one. I think they even specified arrows too. And I think that is directed towards houses, maybe not people. I don't understand that one entirely. Do you go in there and show them these are all the things that I want to throw at this person, house, parade, whatever? And do they just look at it and go like, yeah, those are fine? There's probably some weirder details in that law, but the law itself, that, you know, the one sentence that I read was weird enough for me to mention. And the last law I wanted to talk about, and I actually knew about this one and I still think it's weird. It is illegal to call margarine butter, which, all right, yeah, you could say like mislabeling a product, like saying, oh, you know, I can't believe it's totally butter, but it's not, it's actually margarine. Yeah, you're false advertising. But you'd figure there'd be like just a law in terms of like false advertising for anything. But I don't know, maybe because they're the food capital, they wanted to make one very specific to something that goes on a lot of their food. I don't know, but what I do know is that there are some pretty damn solid metal bands in Iowa. And yeah, one of them is really famous, and I'm totally gonna talk about them because, I mean, they're like the biggest band from Iowa. But I'm also gonna talk about some other bands as well, and this is gonna be kind of like all over the spectrum in terms of metal. Like, there's definitely some more hardcore stuff, we got some stoner stuff. But yeah, we're gonna kick this one off with the most obvious one on the list, and that is Slipknot and their second album, Iowa. Now, I used to be a really huge Slipknot fan, and I still am to a degree, but most of the time I'm just listening to the first two. I'm a bigger fan of the self-titled, but I feel like this was even more of a landmark album just because they made one of the most extreme nu metal albums ever. So extreme that I struggle actually calling it nu metal. Like, yeah, they wear costumes, they have a DJ and a sampler, and occasionally the lyrics sound a little bit rapped, but there's a lot of extremity on here. Noisy soundscapes, death metal riffs, blast beats. This album is intense, it's dark, it's vicious, and it kind of blows me away as to like how popular it got. When you break it down, I feel like this band should have been like sort of a niche thing. The odds kind of seem like they were stacked against them to be a popular band. Like, you know, there's a lot of costume bands out there too. Like, you know, Gwar definitely got very popular, but not to the point where there was like a lot of crossover success. This band managed to put out singles, and singles that were like flat out heavier than hell, that featured roared vocals, and again, vicious riffs that would not sound out of place on death metal albums in the 90s, and people fucking gobbled it up, present company included. But I was already a fan from the first album, it absolutely blew me away, and this one, again, it kind of upped the ante. It's bigger, it's gnarlier. The production here, even though it's still Ross Robinson, he kind of made it a little bit more crisp sounding. The guitar tone, instead of having that sort of like nu metal muddiness, there was like more of a just vicious kind of like death metal crunch to it. Even Corey's vocals seemed like they dropped down a little bit too, and the songs were flat out heavier. Songs like Disaster Piece, People Equal Shit, and one of my personal favorites, Gently. These songs kind of go beyond like that casual nu metal listener that really likes bands like, you know, Korn, Papa Roach, Coal Chamber. They kind of capture the old school metal essence of just making things sound evil and dark. Like, there's more in common here with like Slayer and Obituary and even like Deicide at times than there is in common with, you know, most nu metal bands. I would even go as far as to say if you strip away the masks and the image and such, we would probably talk about this album a little bit more favorably because I don't think it would have caught the nu metal stigma. While this does have some elements that still overlap into nu metal, it's also kind of one of the albums that I would say kind of killed it. By 2001, the nu metal scene was getting dull. You know, the whole metalcore thing was starting to rise up. I mean, again, if you look at the lineup shift on like Ozfest 2003 versus 2004, you notice a big push towards more of the metalcore bands. But Slipknot remained present because they still had stuff in common with those bands in terms of the heavy syncopated breakdowns, and again, more just flat out crushing riffs. So to a degree, I would say Slipknot kind of saw ahead of the curve and decided to just push themselves into more extremity. Now, following this, it's a bit of a mixed bag. Like, I'm not the biggest fan of Volume 3. It kind of sounds like a Stone Sour album with more percussion on it. But this album is still a flat-out beast. I still come back to this one quite often. I mean, dude, like, Everything Ends. I love that song. My Plague is badass. Left Behind, I don't even know how that managed to take off as a single because it's still gnarly and ugly. But again, my personal favorite on here is still Gently. I love that doomy, ominous build, the big sludgy, just droning riffs on there, the scathing atmosphere, and how it builds to like a fever pitch until the song just absolutely explodes at the end. This album I will probably forever love. It's absolutely killer still. And I know, yeah, Slipknot still gets a fair amount of hate, and they technically should be in the Metal Archives. That always seems to be a point of contention with, well, the edgelords that run the archives. But yeah, if you have never checked out this album for whatever reason, like you were kind of put off by like people making fun of Slipknot, seriously, just check it out, give it a whirl. Who knows, you might really dig it. But yeah, this album still rules. Modern Life is War, Midnight in America. This is the third album from this Marshalltown hardcore act. I got in this band with their album My Love, My Way. I was starting to really like get into bands coming off of Equal Vision Records, and you know, I just like old school hardcore. And this band, for me at least, was kind of like a bit of a break from a lot of the, well, mid-2000s melodic metalcore that I was listening to. I feel like I've been bringing that up a lot in these videos, but yeah, I used to listen to a lot of mid-2000s melodic metalcore. But this band was a little bit more on the punk side. In fact, a lot of their stuff I found very comparable to like bands like Bane, and I would even say like Converge to a degree. Everything is very explosive, but it's also emotional, but it doesn't cross over into that more emo-y territory. We don't have any of those like bleated emo vocals like you would hear on like Dashboard Confessional. A lot of this is just very raw, anguished screaming, which captures a lot of emotion in its delivery, a lot of rage, desperation, but the songs are biting and intense, and there's a good amount of variety on here. The opening track on here, Useless Generation, opens up with these just absolutely intense drum fills, like snare rolls, and the whole song, honestly, I feel like most of the beat is a fill, but you have this like biting Converge-like energy to it, and every now and then this band does get a little bit more metallic, like the song Stagger Lee. Honestly, it feels like kind of a combination of sludge metal and hardcore. You get this kind of like swampier, dingier sort of like atmosphere on it, and there's like these interesting droning riffs. It's more of a slow, plodding song, and I believe the song is actually based on an old folk story, which I don't know if it's rooted in Iowa, but I mean, it's an interesting one about, well, murder and, like, I think hiding a body. That's pretty hardcore. The title track has some, like, very vicious, almost thrashy riffs on here, but a lot of this is about this sort of, like, melancholic, dark energy. Like, yeah, it's heavy, it's brooding, but around it, I feel like there's this, like, very depressive, very withdrawn sort of energy. And when it gets heavier, it's like these giant emotional outbursts of just pure rage. That really shows up a lot in the faster songs like Night Shift at the Potato Factory. I feel like that implies potatoes need to be like assembled. Or the Motorcycle Boy Reigns. There's probably an interesting story behind that one too. Or Pendulum, or one that probably doesn't need any explanation. Fuck the Sex Pistols. I guess they're not fans. But yeah, there's this constant give and take between these like explosive, faster parts and these more moody, withdrawn atmospheric sections. There's points where I can compare this to like later Thrice, Helmet. I would even say like a little bit of Cave In too. I like the fact that this feels like legit angst too. Like you can feel the rage, the heart, like everything kind of poured into these songs. And I feel like this band is just like super underrated when it comes down to hardcore. But I don't think they ever like really compromised their sound either. They stayed pretty damn heavy. And they ended up breaking up not too long after this album was released. This came out in 2007. I think they broke up in 2008. They did reform in 2012 and put out an album in 2013 called Fever Hunting, which I still have yet to check out, but the reviews on it seemed like they were pretty good. And honestly, revisiting this band again definitely has me interested in that. But yeah, if you're a big fan, again, Bane, Converge, God, man, American Nightmare, or whatever they call themselves after that, Give Up the Ghost, kind of similar to that too. Check this band out, killer album. Green Death, Manufacturing Evil. This is the second album from this Des Moines-based heavy / speed / thrash metal act. It's kind of a blend of all those things. I actually saw these guys play here in Toledo in our Club Frankie's years ago, and they absolutely killed it live, so much so that I bought this album and another one of their albums. And yeah, calling this band a flat-out thrash band or speed metal band or heavy metal band, it really is a blend of all those things. And there's even some other additional spices on here that I totally forgot about. But a lot of their sound is just based on thrashy rhythms, solid riffs, good heavy metal harmonies, sick leads, and predominantly clean vocals. This guy has like more of a flat out rocker voice. Like it doesn't do a lot of the high pitch wailing you would associate with like, you know, Iron Maiden and so on and so forth. He kind of sounds more like the frontman of Night Demon, which Night Demon, he's got more of a mid-range, but there's a good like kind of gruffness to it. Very much the same with this guy. Every now and then you get some growls to kind of spice it up and, you know, kind of add some heft to like some of the sludgier, darker, more brooding songs like Demons or Devil's Night. And sometimes they call in some hefty backup like Gates of Hell, which actually features David Vincent doing some backup growls. And that song, honestly, it's predominantly death metal. Rightfully so, though. You have David Vincent, and he is growling his guts out. But yeah, you have blast beats on there, heavy, lumbering, very morbid angel-esque riffs. It's probably one of the heaviest tracks of the album, though I will say, like, Through the Eye and Demons in particular definitely have, like, some more death metal flirtations on there, but overall, I would still say they kind of, like, lurk in the realm of, like, heavy metal, like, maybe something a little bit more akin to like Crypt Sermon, because there's definitely a bit of doom to it. The production on here is solid. It's very crisp. The guitar tones get this great crunch to it. And while I wouldn't say this album has a uniform sound because there's a lot of stylistic changes on it, it is solid throughout. Like they do well shifting to these other styles. They're not like just trying to squeeze in a couple of like death metal riffs or doom metal riffs just to, you know, like try out something. They clearly know how to inject them in there because the songs don't lose momentum. Solace might be the only song in here that I didn't care for just because it's more of a dirge-like ballad. It's all right, but it just didn't grab me. But the rest of the songs in here, regardless of wherever they go, they do it well. Well, you could say that this band, you know, might have a bit of a, like an identity crisis on this album where, you know, you could pick individual tracks and it might sound like the same singer singing with like different bands. Again, I think it's all executed really well. So yeah, if you're a big fan of Anthrax, again, like a little bit of death metal, but it's kind of like thrashy death metal, like Vader, again, like early Morbid Angel, stuff like that. And, you know, maybe like a little bit of Judas Priest too. Check this album out. And yeah, I need to catch up on what they've been doing recently because I forgot how much I really dug this. Badass stuff. Telekinetic Yeti, Primordial. This is the second album from this Dubuque. I don't know if I'm saying that town's name right. Either way, second album from this two-man stoner doom act. This was a year-ender for me in 2022. Kind of came out of nowhere. I believe it was recommended in the comments. We ended up jamming it, and holy shit, I love this album. I still jam the hell out of it. I love stoner doom, and one of the things that I love about stoner doom is the fact that if you are on guitars or bass in a stoner doom band, you are a tone chaser, and you're looking for the thickest, graveliest, densest, murkiest sound possible. And this band does this as a two-piece. While I believe there might be guitars in here, I think most of this is just done with the bass in terms of like effects pedals and, you know, playing like guitar riffs on a bass with, you know, just this elaborate rig, I imagine. Either way, the results on here absolutely snarl. Like right from the opening track, the title track, those first strummed riffs you hear, you're probably going to have the same reaction I did first hearing this, which was, oh my God, that's heavy. As soon as the drums build up, you get in these big, slow grooves and these just stomping, chuggy rhythms. The riff work in here, I think, is great. It's a good combination of just like stony, heavy, very Black Sabbath-inspired stuff, but with like a sort of like Melvins-ish tinge to it. But the frequent use of like cool effects like phasers and such gives it like this cool spacey atmosphere to kind of balance off the just absolutely disgustingly heavy drone that this band can generate. Baseline, this album just snarls with atmosphere, and for the most part, it just lets the music do the talking. There's very little in the way of vocals, like you get these, you know, more tuneful bellows that show up. Even in the songs that do have vocals, they are spaced out quite a bit. Like you'll have long sections that are predominantly instrumental. They kind of just lock onto a groove and a riff and just keep trucking along. And whether or not they're just beating you over the head with like just seriously heavy riffs or just kind of opening up this big, spacey, lush atmosphere that, you know, kind of feels like this album cover, honestly. Like, I feel like this album cover should be spray painted on like countless Econoline vans as a good promotional tool for this. But either way, whatever they're doing on this album, they do it well. I really don't think there are any lulls on this album at all. Whether you get into like more almost sludge metal territory with songs like Ghost Train, Beast, and Toke Wizard, yeah, there's some definite weed references on here because I mean, yeah, how can there not be with a band name like Telekinetic Yeti? One of my personal favorites on here, though, is Stoned Ape Theory, which is, I believe, the longest of the instrumentals. That song just absolutely riffs. I love the transitions in it. It's got this good, steady groove to it. The riff work in particular, I kind of like this weird sort of like static hiss there is to like the higher end notes in terms of like the tags and the ends of the riffs. It's kind of dissonant. It's almost like hypnotic, tuneful static, I guess you could say. And the fun, groovy syncopation that shows up here, like Ancient Nug. Ancient Nug, I don't know, that one could be my favorite track on the album. I absolutely love the steady build. It's got this fun off-time rhythm to begin with, and like I just kind of like how it builds up. There's some like fun snare rolls and these just super heavy riffs, but one of my favorite parts is where it breaks in this like faster stomp and you get like some lead melodies on there. Extra stony lead melodies, by the way, too. But my favorite part is you get this cool slowdown towards the end into the heaviest breakdown on the entire album. That last 30 seconds or whatever of that song is just absolutely amazing. In terms of newer stoner doom bands, this band has quickly become one of my favorites. If you love stoner doom, if you love riffs that sound so stoned they would fail a piss test immediately, check this album out. I still need to check out their first one as well, but this one has been in heavy rotation ever since it came out, and in terms of like stoner doom here lately, this has been kind of one of my go-to jams. Check it out. Strong recommend. All right, these next three, I don't have physical media for. In fact, I was actually looking for more bands to cover because I really didn't have a lot of Iowa-based bands in terms of like CDs. So I did some Google searching and I actually found an article about Iowa-based metal bands that were kind of underground, and I ended up checking out a bunch of them, and I became a fan. I also became very disappointed when I couldn't find CDs for them, whether it was because they simply hadn't printed out more, they didn't make them in the first place, or they just did like vinyl and tapes, which is annoying for me. Anyway, the first band that I came across, and at least in this article they were the main band that they were talking to, was a band called Druids, and this was going over their third album or EP, I guess there's kind of a gray area there, Monuments. This is a Pella-based stoner doom metal act, and yeah, the next two on here I found out directly from this article as well, but I ended up jamming this album multiple times, and I like it so much that I'm kind of irritated that they don't have CDs. So Druids, if you see this, if you ever decide to put out CDs for this EP or album again, I would absolutely love one. Now, while I would say stoner doom kind of covers a good chunk of it, this also kind of has a little bit of overlap with like, I guess you could call it like progressive sludge bands like Baroness, I would say Mastodon, but also they share a lot of elements with the Sword too. The opening track, New Breath, absolutely amazing stony, very Sabbathy riffs, good drum sound. I love the production on here. And man, like some absolutely killer vocal harmonies. Honestly, there's some vocal harmonies in here that kind of remind me a bit of like, Satan and a lot of classic heavy metal. And that, of course, just backed by just solid, catchy riffs. But across this EP, what I really liked was the variety on here. I was expecting those vocals to kind of carry throughout the entire EP, but they kind of change up a little bit. Occasionally you'll get some songs that have more harsh, gravelly vocals. They almost sound like a completely different singer altogether, but I think at least two of the members on here are actually doing vocals. Mirrors of Trigon and Iron Healer in particular stand out as like heavier, more aggressive tracks, but they never lose that catchiness in the riffs. Mirrors of Trigon especially, and I love that song for being just this big 9-minute riff fest. It builds the atmosphere and builds tension really well. And the tension building pays off in the form of like big riffy crescendos, some heavier breakdowns. I mean, it's just flat out awesome. The whip was also a big standout for me on that one as well. I love the riff variety on there. Like you have these more like machine gun fast riffs played over slower tempos. There's some lush heavy metal harmonies on there too. And there's some really interesting synth work that kind of hangs out in the background and kind of gives it like a little bit of a 70s prog sort of flair. Yeah, I dug this album, and believe me, I was disappointed going to their Bandcamp and finding out they had no CDs. So again, Druids, if you actually see this, if you feel like printing up more CDs, or if you just have one lying around, let me know. I will gladly buy it. But yeah, again, if you're a fan of Mastodon, Baroness, The Sword, You know, definitely some Caius in there too. Hell, maybe even like some classic stuff like Deep Purple and Rainbow as well. Check this album out, and I'm definitely going to check out more by this band in the future. Next up, we have Traffic Death with their album Dead End. This is the second album from this Des Moines-based thrash metal / grindcore act. This band at one point shared a member with Druids, and they even have an ex-member of Necrofilth, which is just this absolutely disgusting death grind act from Cleveland and Colorado. Pretty sure I brought him up in the Colorado one. Anyway, yet another one that, believe me, I wanted a CD for after listening to it, and then discovered that there are no CD versions even made for this. And this band's sound is absolutely fucking rabid. Like, this band sounds like they have rabies. Everything is fast, high energy, really solid about alternating between like just grindcore fits and like flat out like crossover thrash, like big machine gun riffs, D beats, some occasional leads that show up, even a smidge of melody, or I mean, we're in the Midwest, we might as well say skosh. Alternating deep growls and high screams. It's kind of similar to like Exhumed, honestly kind of similar to Necrofilth as well, and honestly kind of has that just absolutely explosive nature of a band like Oxygen Destroyer as well. The songs are generally short, violent, packed with crazy riff changes, but again, like some interesting surprises here and there. Like, you know, you'd be surprised at how catchy some of these songs actually are. Mandatory Sentence actually has like some nods to like classic speed metal and heavy metal. There's some like really catchy harmonies, but again, all delivered in a very ferocious fashion. Like, it still has melody, but it still just wants to like gnaw your face off. Roadside Assistance leans a little bit more towards the grindcore side, but there's also like some almost like thrashy melodic death metal riffs to it. Like, it's almost like a thrashier version of a band like Carnal Forge, or maybe even a band like Skeleton Witch. Like, there's almost sort of like a blackened vibe to the screams, and a surprisingly very melodic lead on it. Like, it almost sounds out of place if there wasn't some additional melody that was actually squeezed into the song. And there's also just a lot of like flat out punky energy to it. Self-inclined, gun in hand. These songs make good use of just snarling punk riffs and kind of alternate between like, you know, the more thrash metal centric stuff. And that kind of works with the production here. It's very raw sounding. It sounds like it was recorded in a fucking shitty abandoned fucking hospital or a storage unit. I don't know, whichever one had the better acoustics. That isn't to say it sounds bad. Actually, I really like the sound of it. Like, this kind of has like a live vibe to it. And I feel like with this style, that's exactly the thing you want in the production. You want to capture that live sound, and this just sounds absolutely feral. The bass tone on here absolutely snarls. Like, it is just thick and murky and just disgusting. It's also very short. I want to say it's only like 25 minutes. I might be off on there, but it is vicious start to finish. It's foot on the gas the entire time. There aren't really any moments in here where I'd say they take a break. Like, yeah, you got some groovy pockets here and there, but they ain't hanging out long. The same with the melodies too. They are there long enough to kind of surprise you and catch you off guard, especially if you've been like listening to this from start to finish and then all of a sudden hear a melody pop up, because the rest of the time this album is just beating you over the head with like a tire iron. But all of it, I think, is really well executed. If you're a big fan, again, of Exhumed, Oxygen Destroyer, Necrofilth, I mean, yeah, there's probably a reason why they share some similarities there. But yeah, check this album out. It's an absolute banger. And again, another one I really hope they do some CDs for. Believe me, that'll probably also be the complaint about this next one, which is Bloodspell. And this is their self-titled EP. I believe this is their only release. This is a Des Moines-based doom metal / post / sludge metal hybrid. And it is absolutely slow and filthy and disgusting. I feel like I've been talking about bass tones a lot here, but once again, the bass tone on this album is filthy. It is actually very dominant. Like, it kind of overpowers the guitars, but in a good way, because this album is thicker than a Snicker with sludge. Every riff on here you can 100% feel. It is slow and plodding. It's dark and murky. Honestly, the opening track on here reminded me a lot of Neurosis, circa like Souls at Zero, Enemy of the Sun. Like, it just has that sort of like brooding nature. There's like a steady hum of like feedback in the background, and then these just gigantic massive droning riffs and these plodding rhythms. It works really well with the murky production and these almost kind of buried, harrowing screams. Like they kind of sit a little bit in the back of the mix. It kind of sounds like they got like someone duct taped to a chair in the studio but far away from the mic, and they are like, I don't know, squeezing a lemon and open wounds on his body. Not all the songs on this EP have vocals either, but even as instrumentals, I think the songs are solid. Torchbearer in particular, that one just goes for the doomy throat. Like it's got a little bit more of that like sort of like Sabbathy swagger to it. Straightforward heavy, but still has all that just dense, murky atmosphere to it. Ascension was also a big standout for me. I like the more haunting melodies on top of the sludgy, droning bass and kind of this steady build of atmosphere. Honestly, it reminded me a lot of like early Cult of Luna, and I'm a gigantic fan of that band. The song Mountain, though, I think definitely shows off their more stoner metal side. Like, I think each one of these songs, they kind of embody a little bit of the mix of genres that they use, and Mountain kind of just goes for the throat in terms of just like the stoniest riffs they could possibly muster up. Big Black Sabbath vibes. And it also has like more of a jam feel. Like they kind of just find a riff, find a groove, and latch onto it and build off of that. It still has harsher vocals, but the whole vibe of it feels, I don't know, like a little bit more warm and kind of inviting. I mean, up until a dude screams. But there's some cool like phaser effects and like some, you know, fun atmospheric melodies. It doesn't feel as like harsh and biting as some of the earlier material, or at least some of the stuff that, you know, embodied more like sludge metal or doom metal, or even that like Neurosis like post metal vibe. Across the board, I dug this entire EP, and seeing that it was only available digitally, yeah, once again, I was pretty disappointed, but this is a solid band. I hope they're working on something new. As always, I'm going to put up like links for all this stuff, but yeah, check this out, especially again, if you're a big fan of, you know, Cult of Luna, Neurosis, also like a little bit of like Mono Lord too. Just check this band out, trust me. And this last band I'm going to go over is actually attached to Bloodspell, because I was looking around at Bloodspell's archives and I checked out another band that I believe the drummer was a member of, and lo and behold, they were from Iowa. Not super shocked there, but it was also very different from, I think, literally anything else on this list. And that is the band Glass Ox with their album Winds of Violence. This is their second album. They are a Marshalltown blackened crust / heavy metal act, and this one is a really interesting listen. Like, I kind of went into this thinking like, all right, blackened crust, we're probably going to get some stuff that sounds like I don't know, like Midnight, maybe Poison Ruin, and you know, maybe just like a lot of like D-beat oriented bands that, you know, love like Celtic Frost, and there's definitely some of that, but I found a lot more in the way of melody, atmosphere, and you know, in terms of like the crustier elements, they're still there, and it's almost in the delivery and the sort of the angsty sound to it. But in terms of like the songwriting, there's a lot more going on in the way of dynamics. When this band is heavy, the tone doesn't necessarily scream like punk or crust or even black metal necessarily. This band has a very deep, sludgy tone overall, but it's really effective in terms of like, you know, creating these big droning atmospheres, whether they're like strumming on tremolos or doing like punk chords or doing some flat out giant breakdowns. Rogue Sons in particular has just a flat out disgusting sludge metal breakdown with gang vocals and even some atmospheric synths in the background. And the punk elements are definitely there, they're just more scattered. Like you get a good D-beat ripper and like Fire and Hate. Rogue Sons and Isle Contact, both of those have like some more like flat out like hardcore riffs to them. They're angsty, they're in your face, they're a little bit more explosive, but from track to track, this band can kind of like shift around their sound a lot and really catch you off guard. Rain in particular was a huge stand-up because it sounds kind of nothing like anything else in the album. Like granted, it does build up and get heavier, but it's heavy in the sense of like post-rock, like stuff like Caspian or This Will Destroy You. Has a lot of cleaner guitars, but again, they're played in such a way where it's just densely layered and you get this sort of like droning, haunting effect. The drums are more like tribal rhythms. You get spoken word or samples. I couldn't decide which they were, but they definitely added like this more like, I don't know, dark ambient sort of sound to it. And even behind that, you have like these droning tremolo lead melodies too. It's a very lush, atmospheric, dark song. And hearing that and then shifting over to a song like Spellcaster, which has probably the most metallic riffs on the entire album, like they're thrashy and snarly, it almost sounds like you're listening to two different bands. If I was gonna like sum up this entire album in terms of all they do, I feel like you could probably find it on the last track, Ditch Burner, which is their longest song on this album. And it kind of literally does everything they do, plus adding some like post black metal atmosphere to it, like stuff that's more similar to like Ghost Bath or Harakiri for the Sky. But it alternates between those like more heavy tremolo, like layered, lush sounds to just like flat out biting, snarling thrash riffs. This whole album was pretty damn awesome. And this is the only one I've jammed by this band. I think they have 3. I know there's at least one other because this is their second album. But yeah, this was another one that I kind of just went down the rabbit hole to check out some different bands from Iowa. And this one was pretty damn good. In terms of like the whole fans of thing, it's really kind of hard to peg. Like there's stuff in here that reminds me of like Converge, and there's stuff in here that reminds me a lot of like Poison Ruin when they're in their more punky gear. But there's also stuff that reminds me of like Garia and, you know, occasionally like Toxic Holocaust. It's kind of all over the place, but it's all over the place in a good way. Kind of like that Green Death album. Like they are good at doing different styles and they're pretty good at blending them all together. Though I'd say like it's a little bit less of like the identity crisis sort of thing that I kind of got on Green Death. This feels a lot more cohesive. But yeah, check this one out. Solid band. Looking forward to finding some of their stuff, hopefully on CD one of these days, because again, I just couldn't find anything on CD once again. And that will do it for Iowa. This one was kind of fun because, again, I didn't start off with very much from this entire scene, but, you know, doing some digging, I found some really cool stuff that otherwise I probably wouldn't have heard of. So if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, and if you were new to the channel, subscribe, because we do stuff like this all the time. We also have memberships. They are only 99 cents, and our lone perk is doing members-only streams, which we will probably be doing one next month, or, well, next year, or this year. Who knows when you're watching this? You're probably watching this in 2025. But yeah, we're going to get back to that, and again, we're trying to think of like some subjects to talk about on those because we want to kind of keep them different than our usual just chit-chat streams. We also have stupid emojis. I still need to get around to finding more stupid emojis because we just need more stupid emojis, I guess. And yeah, this is the new way to support the channel more directly as we're trying to get away from Patreon. We also still have our store, thrallsmetal.com, with our t-shirts and our hats. That is linked down below. And also down below is the join button if you would like to join up and become a member of the channel. But whether you do or you don't, we appreciate all the support you guys have given us. It has been an amazing run, 6 years of doing this, and it's still like honestly one of the most fun things I think I've ever done in my life. Still think that sounds a little sad, but you know, whatever. The point is, you guys make this so damn awesome. The comments, the likes, the shares, all that. And we look forward to just overloading you guys with more content. I still have more states to go over for damn sure. And I'm gonna bring back some other segments that I haven't just had time to do in a while. So yeah, thank you all once again, and we will catch you later.